The actual problem is to find again the condition of nature. And the answer is the major problem of today and tomorrow, the proper occupation of the land.
Charles Edouard Jeanneret, aka Le Corbusier, was an architectural triple threat. He built, he wrote, he painted. He was a person truly obsessed with all things spatial, and even though only a small fraction of what he designed was actually realized, Le Corbusier is all over our built environment. This is because he had strong opinions and a never-ending array of proposals for how our planet should be designed at all scales, from chairs to metropolises. In the world of the spatial arts, Le Corbusier is a deeply polarizing figure. This is no wonder, because he was polarizing at the core of his character. He was an obsessively orderly man who also happened to be a creative genius. Some of the world's most interesting, but also most despicable people are kind of like that, stubbornly remaining outside of boxes while compulsively trying to sort everything else into them. Was he an authoritarian egomaniac, or just a visionary with impeccable taste? Here, a fracture occurs within the building professions. Architects love their Corbu, while city planners despise him completely. Countless failed projects and flawed premises about how to build a city are blamed on him. In any case, it is important to understand the foundations of his ideas, for they transformed our environment, for better or worse. Input 1. Ideal geometry. The most important thing to understand about Le Corbusier is his deep-seated faith in the redemptive power of ideal geometry. If the plan was right, if it was generated according to the universal principles of geometry, it will bring harmony and balance to all aspects of life. This was Le Corbusier's only true ideology. This is why he had no problem engaging with diametrically opposite political regimes throughout his career. The only thing of real importance was to realize the plan. Everything else was details and irrelevant in comparison. Input 2. Paris. Le Corbusier moved to Paris when he was around 30 years old, and he lived there for the rest of his life. The shape of Paris is an interplay between the exuberant and messy energy of its everyday life and the tradition of a powerful hand coming forth and imposing order into the urban fabric. Le Corbusier loved the city. Its shape defined and refined him on so many levels. But by the time he arrived, some time had passed since the Haussmann reconstruction, and the raw chaos of life was prevailing again. Le Corbusier could hardly resist the urge to sort it all out. Input 3. Technology. At the core, a lot of Le Corbusier's designs were about him taking a new technological innovation to its extreme logical conclusion, but with a ton of style. The fact of the high-rise building means that a given site can be multiplied many times vertically. This means that the same densities can be achieved with only a small piece of the ground covered. This way, the land is freed from oppression by buildings and can be turned into healthy green parks. The fact of mechanical transportation means that the traditional street is obsolete. A modern town will have to be built around new channels of transportation. Trying to make streets for everyone will result in streets that kill pedestrians and stifle traffic. From 1922 to 1933, Le Corbusier developed his ideas through a series of 3 iconic plans. These ideas will culminate in the Athens Charter, a manifesto about how to build a good city. In 1922, 35-year-old Le Corbusier exhibited at an avant-guard art and design show in Paris. He presented a plan for a contemporary city of 3 million inhabitants. This ideal modern city was to be built on a clean slate. Le Corbusier ridiculed the architect's fear of a blank slate site. Architects like as complicated sites as possible because then the site can make decisions instead of them. The ones who have ideas of their own, Corbu thought, want to build on a tabula rasa. At the core of the ideal city was to be a business center made out of 24 identical 60-story skyscrapers. The business center was to be surrounded by residences, luxury apartments for the professionals and more modest accommodation for the workers. The business center of glass skyscrapers was a radical move, especially at the time when the Eiffel Tower was still the tallest structure in France. People were confused and slightly intrigued by the plan, but no one really took it seriously. However, Corbusier felt that he was onto something with this plan. He wanted to make a point that couldn't be ignored. The International Exhibition of Modern Decorative and Industrial Arts in 1925 was important for Le Corbusier's career and for the history of modern architecture. His pavilion included a revolutionary sample of the modern apartment and an iconic urban plan. This time, he applied his ideas to the city of Paris. To save itself, the city has to rebuild its center. The dense core of Paris, on the right bank, made no sense. It should be demolished and replaced by 18 identical 60-story skyscrapers. He managed to get some attention with this, but was mostly dismissed as crazy provocateur. Even though Le Corbusier was a radical spatial revolutionary, he was still open to new ideas. In 1930, he updated his vision of a perfect city into the radiant city. Unlike the previous plans, the radiant city is a linear city. In the radiant city, different uses are strictly sorted out into different parts. It has a kind of an abstract human body structure. The skyscraper business center is the head, the main highway forms the spine, housing forms the arms, factories and warehouses stand for the legs, and heavy industry is at the very end as the feet. There is no more separation of housing for rich and poor here in the radiant city. But the fundamentals of Corbu's utopia remain. Sorting out of different functions, freestanding high-rises and blocks, free circulation, and lots of open green space. So, as we have seen, throughout the roaring 1920s, Le Corbusier had developed a toolkit of ideas that he could then apply to real cities all over the world. Different spaces, different places, but always the same principles. In the following decade, this toolkit would allow him to produce countless plans for the reconstruction of all kinds of cities. Almost none of it was built. No one took him seriously. What do we make then of the fact that the ideas that Le Corbusier put forward in these plans came to be applied to the reconstruction of cities everywhere in the 50s, 60s, and onwards? It is interesting to think that an architect could have such power to transform reality. Of course, Le Corbusier couldn't really know what kind of spaces will his toolkit produce when applied to see it, feel it, touch it real world. He was putting forward radical ideas for the new age ahead. He had no real reference point for this. What is left for us to ponder today is, to what extent did Le Corbusier create reality, and how much of it was just him predicting the future?